And hello, everybody. Good evening and happy Tuesday. It is Tuesday, right? God, it feels like another day. Feels like it's already been a long week, but it hasn't been. Uh, we're gonna be bringing you in here at about 8 o'clock, and we thank you for flying, Air Maloney. Glad to have you guys here with me. We are going to be doing another fantastic, stupendous, exceptional live read of Gifted by D.W. Lewis. Sorry, guys, I'm multitasking as we start here because I have to make sure that we get everything up here that we're supposed to have. And now we've got it. All right. Well, glad to have you guys here with me this evening for another reading of Gifted by D.W. Lewis. Hopefully, you guys were able to be here with us last time to be able to get a listen in. And if not, they are all available on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/ at Sir Arminius. All of the previous chapters. That would be the prologue through chapter 7. Tonight we'll be starting into chapter 8 and going until, well, Lord knows how long. We'll be going until we stop. How's that? That sounds spectacular, doesn't it? We will go until we canna go no more. I canna, I canna go no more, Captain. I don't know what I'm gonna do. There's Klingons on the starboard bow. Starboard bow. Starboard bow. Okay, there's no Klingons on the starboard bow. We don't have to scrape them off, Jim. So, last time we saw our hero, Cal, going on his mission to be able to save Ovette. So he snuck out of the orphanage. He went and stole the sword and Leif's sword. I had to think of a name there for a minute. Leif's sword. He went and stole Leif's sword. And he went out and he got food from his favorite place to get food from, who told him, no more. There will be no more. And then as he munched a little bit, he ran into his favorite people who like to beat him up, or try to at least. Ugh, I think I'm relaxing back here a little bit far. I realized my chair wasn't locked. There we go. Leaning back. And he got himself into a little bit of a scuffle and lost the sword. They took the sword away from him. Oh no! Oh no! Oh yeah! So he continued on to meet up with Shay, who told him she was going to bring him at night to go meet up with some others of the rebels. And so they wait till night. They make their way past some guards. Shay kills the guard. They make their way through. They get to this huge palatial mansion and come to find out that it happens to be the home of Jord. Jord, the man who he has been fighting with the entire book. It is his father's home. So, he's brought in. Jord isn't happy about it. Cal isn't happy about it. Jord's father isn't really happy about it, but they make their plans. They put everything together. They make a new friend. I want to say Artemis was the name. That sounds right to me. So they make their new friend. They meet up with Artemis, and they plan their mission, and they are going into the volcano to attack the Grand Inquisitor. I seem to recall the name being something like that. Listen to the recordings. You'll get the exact names. I'm trying to do it from memory here. Uh, so they go to attack the Grand Inquisitor. Cal goes off with Artemis, and they go to the control center. Shay and her crew all go a different way. Um, Cal has found out at this point that Shay most likely is an assassin, and if she cannot get the Grand Inquisitor, she is going to kill Ovette. Because if they can't, have the gifted, nobody can have the gifted. So, Cal and Artemis go do their thing. Cal ends up leaving Artemis on Artemis's recommendation. He goes to find Ovette, gets in a little bit of a scuffle along the way, gets to Ovette. She's like, has like an ethereal chain that is connecting her to the gigantic chains in the sky. And he goes and he ends up cutting the ethereal chain. He ends up cutting the chain itself, saving Ovette. And that is pretty much where we left off after our last reading. So that is also where we're going to pick up, is right after that had happened. Of course you're not. I'm on the wrong screen. I have 3 screens going, monitor here, monitor there, and you guys. So he hypothetically saved Ovette, and then Cal gave himself over to the encroaching darkness and allowed himself to slip away. And so, with that, we're going to start into the reading for tonight. Got a lot of book left to go. If you've missed any of it, again, make sure you catch it on the YouTube channel. If you have not already subscribed to the YouTube channel, go subscribe to the YouTube channel, would you? And these will be recorded, so after I finish the reading tonight, I will get these as well posted to the YouTube channel. So if you miss the second half, the first half, the middle half, 3 halves, right? 3 halves in a whole. If you miss any of it, stop out and have a listen. Like it, comment it, share it with your friends. If you want to, you can support D.W. Lewis by buying the book on Amazon, reading it on Kindle Unlimited, whatever it happens to be. I will be happy to chat with you guys and answer any questions that you have for me in between chapters. But because I'm recording, I won't talk during the chapter. And now, sit back, relax, and prepare to enjoy as we dive into our next reading of Gyfted by D.W. Lewis, starting with 8. Cal's muscles ached, heavy and unused. He blinked against the blinding light, struggling to open his eyes. His left arm felt tight, constricted. It stung. The skin sticky. The smell of medicinal herbs wafted around him. He flexed his fingers, sinew and tendon groaning as if waking from a long sleep. Ugh. Ovette? Cal! A familiar voice called back, and Cal jolted as arms flung themselves around him. Sweat and blood tinged the floral scent he'd come to associate with Shay. His eyes began to adjust to the light, blurry shapes resolving into familiar faces. Shay leaned back, releasing him from her grip. George stood near a small window a few paces behind her, his expression solemn. A blood-stained bandage, seen through his tunic, was wrapped tight around his midriff. "You're alive! I can't believe it! You're alive!" Shay wiped a tear from her cheek, her voice trembling. "Where am I?" Cal asked, noting elements of the room. Birds squawked outside, their calls drifting into the room. The dull clang of a metal bell echoed in the distance, mingling with voices discussing the haul they'd brought in. The air, thick with the tang of salt, tickled his nostrils. "You're in Undis," Shay replied. "What?" Cal tried to sit up, but his body refused the command. "How? What about Igni? What about Ovette?" George scoffed, turning his attention away from the window and toward Shay. "Marcus will want to know he's awake." Without waiting for a response, George left the room. "Shay, what's going on? Why am I here?" Cal asked, his chest light in spite of the deep ache. "Cal, how did you do it? How did you cut the chain?" Shay stared at Cal, searching his eyes for some kind of answer. "The chain? I don't know. Shay dropped her gaze, eyes watering all over again. The shake and rumble of the chain room came back to Cal. The memory of the booming voice in his head. Ovette, laying unconscious as everything went dark. The pit in his stomach told him something terrible had happened. "Shay, what's going on? Where is Ovette? Is she—" Cal couldn't finish the sentence. Shay's expression told him the answer before she spoke. "Cal, something happened after you cut the chain." Shay's voice broke, her gaze fixed on the floor. "The volcano. It erupted. The embers. Igni. It's gone." She spoke through held-back tears, bringing her gaze up to meet Cal's. "Ovette. She's dead." "No. No, I don't believe you." Cal's voice cracked, his hands trembling as he gripped the bedsheets. "I'm sorry, Cal. There was nothing we could do." "You could have saved her, but you didn't. You saved me. You brought me back." Cal pushed Shay off the bed. "Why am I still here?" His voice carried the events of the last few days. It was too much for him. Ovette was gone. Igni was gone. Everything was gone. His chest ached as he struggled to breathe. He felt like throwing up and screaming at the same time. He wanted to get up, wanted to go back, wanted to help, to do something, anything. But his body refused him, muscles screaming in protest as he tried to move. Ah! The door to the room opened, and a man stepped in, his skin as rough as bark. Jord followed close behind. The stitching in the newcomer's dark leather armor bulged against his muscles. A man built for battle. His stone-like gaze locked onto Cal, his expression unyielding. Jord looked minuscule in comparison. Anyone would next to this mountain. "Jord, Shay, give us a moment," he said, his voice rumbling from his chest. Shay did as she was told without question. She gathered herself and took one forlorn look at Cal before leaving the room. Jord gestured with an open arm to guide her out. "Suppose you're wondering where you are," the man said, his tone gruff. "Undis. Shay told me." "Aye, but did she tell you where in Undis?" "I don't care. I won't be staying long," Cal said, determined despite his pain. And where do you imagine yourself running off to? The man's eyes narrowed, his steel gaze boring into Cal. Or is it back to? Cal didn't reply. He tried to match the stranger's gaze, steel on steel, but something in the man's expression told him he wasn't as intimidated. I'm afraid there's not much to go back to. Igni's a molten lake by now. Nothing could have survived that eruption. You don't know that. True, but you don't know that it did either. And you going off and getting yourself killed would be a considerable waste of talent, he said, seeing through Cal's bravado. Who are you? Barkis, Shay's father, rebel, David Nuisance, and the guy you want on your side. Why? With Igni gone and the Gyfted dead, I imagine your highest priority is going to be getting some good old-fashioned vengeance. Barkis rumbled, lighting a thick cigar and placing it in his mouth. Stick with me and mine, and I'll give you as much vengeance as your little hollow-born frame can manage. The rebellion could always use another shock trooper. Cal didn't respond, unsure of what to say. Barkis turned to leave, his heavy boots thudding against the floorboards. Think on what I said, he called over his shoulder as he opened the door. Welcome to the rebellion, Cal. The doors thudded shut behind him, leaving Cal stuck staring at the spot where Barkis had stood. To his side, he noticed his dagger and Leif's shattered sword lying on top of a desk. Next to them lay a battered and worn coin pouch, the cloth singed in a few places. Cal reached out, his fingers trembling as they closed around the pouch. I like it just the way it is. Ovette's words flashed in his mind, and Cal couldn't hold back any longer. He clutched the pouch to his chest and cried, the deep, hopeless cry of a boy who had been frightened and helpless for too long. Well, that was a short chapter. I guess I should have read that last week, huh? Oh, well, it was a good little place to leave off for last week, so we'll just continue right on in. Interlude 1. Ovette, Day 1. Ovette tugged against the arm of the prefect, stumbling as he dragged her away from Cal. Her heart sank as she stared at his motionless body on the ground, a pool of blood spreading beneath him. She couldn't see his face, hidden by the angle of his body. She strained to see if he was breathing, to see if she had been able to help him. Or not. Crackling, splintering wood drew her attention back to the orphanage, to the fire that was tearing through her home. Parts of it had already begun to crumble, the roof caving in with a deafening crash. Her chest ached from the sobbing, her anguished cries giving way to dry heaves. The prefect jerked her toward an awaiting airship. Ovette jumped at the hiss of steam from the engine. Fear prickled up her spine as she stared at the warped metal and the scorch marks the engine left on the ground beneath. It was a small craft, but still nothing like she'd seen up close. She and Cal had spent hours staring up at the mining craft that ferried Gift knows what to and from the volcano. She'd giggled when Cal would promise her a life of adventure aboard a craft of their own one day. But this particular craft held no promise of joy. It was military. It didn't have a purpose outside of ferrying prisoners to their fates. Get in, the prefect said, shoving her forward. She resisted, dug her heels into the dirt. Move it, he barked. When she resisted again, the prefect didn't waste his breath on another command. He struck Ovette across the face and shoved her inside. Her eyes watered, her hand cradling the reddened spot on her cheek. Cal would have fought back. Cal would have cursed and swore and swung his fists until he'd been forced to sit down. But she wasn't Cal. She didn't have his bravery. All she had was the sinking realization that the more she resisted, the worse it would get. She picked herself up off the hard metal flooring and sat down in one of the seats, her body shaking from involuntary trembles. The prefect who'd struck her moved forward, but was shoved back by the man in black armor. With a single shove, the armored man sent the prefect sprawling to the ground and stood over him, motionless. "What are you playing at?" the prefect snapped, the veins in his neck bulging. The man with the white hair stepped to the side and leered down at the prefect. "Name," he said, his tone clipped and devoid of emotion. Uh, Watkins. Gail Watkins. City of origin. Igny, sir. District. It don't got a name. Grew up around the prefect barracks. The Coles, sir." "I see." The white haired man gestured to the other prefects waiting to board the airship. "See to it that Mr. Watkins is returned to his home and relieved of his prefect status. Let it be known that he is a traitor and have his family blacklisted from service." The other prefects jumped into action, ignoring Watkins' cries and pleas as they dragged him away. The white haired man's voice carried a different kind of authority than Ovette was used to. She'd grown used to Lady Havisham's yelling or the barking of prefects on patrol. But this man never raised his voice. His tone had remained calm and constant, yet the prefect on the ground had been terrified, wincing at every question, not daring to stand. This was a different kind of obedience, one born of fear. The white haired man joined Ovette in the airship, seating himself opposite her. The man in black armor followed. Even seated, his presence was looming and silent. "My apologies, my dear," the white haired man said. "Please accept my assurances that you will not have to endure such treatment again." Ovette scooched over in her seat, leaning as far away as the confined space would allow. "I understand your trepidation," he continued, "and you have every reason to distrust me and those under my command. Just know that as long as you cooperate, no further harm will come to you or your friends." Ovette trembled. The airship began to rise, its large doors sliding into place with a mechanical clasp. The judder of the engine and the lurch of this metal casket sent uncomfortable vibrations through her seat, bordering on nauseating. "There's no need to be afraid, Ovette." "You know my name?" Her voice trembled. "I do. I know a great deal about you. Or rather, your ability. Your new gift." "Who are you?" "My title is Lord Inquisitor, but I would prefer we get to know each other on a more personal level. My name is Cesis Gregorin, but you may call me Cesis." Her heart thundered in her chest, each beat echoing in her ears. She flicked her gaze between Ceus and the man in black armor. "He will not harm you," Ceus said, "nor anyone, for that matter. Not unless I command him to do so." "Who is he?" Ceus turned his gaze to the man in black armor, his expression softening, proud almost. "He is my son." "Where are you taking me? Are you going to kill me?" Ceus turned back, his stiff posture doing little to calm her nerves. "Why would you think such a thing?" "You killed them. My family. My—" The words tumbled out before she realized she was speaking. Ceus's expression dropped. His lips thinned. His chest rose and fell as he let out a long sigh. The boy who fought my guardian here. What was his name? Ovette didn't reply. He didn't deserve to know Cal's name. Sia sighed again, his shoulders slumping as he looked to the ground and then back to Ovette. His death, as well as the others, was unfortunate. Deaths I would have preferred to avoid. But you are special, Ovette. I could not risk any harm coming to you. I did what I must do as Lord Inquisitor. What are you going to do with me? What do you want? Ovette, all I want is to help you fulfill your destiny. Week 1. Lava bubbled and roiled outside of the window, a single slit cut into an empty gray space. Ovette stared through the slit, fixed on the pulsing runes of Igni's giant chain, the heat making her eyes water. Her room was sparse, save for a gray slab that jutted out of the wall, topped with white bedding and a small tray of uneaten food. More food on that single tray than she would normally see in a week. Her stomach groaned as she stared at it, but she clenched her fist, her nails digging into her palms as she resolved herself to be defiant somehow, even if it meant wasting food. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as she inspected her meager cell. Uncertain whether it was because of the room's regulated temperature or because of the lightheadedness that washed over her every time she thought of the chain and its pulsing runes. Not thinking about the chain was easier said than done. The air vibrated with gift, a constant, low hum that resonated in the base of her skull. There was a polite knock at the door. Ovette, may I come in? She didn't respond, didn't know what to say. She had no idea how long she'd been held in this place. No idea how long it had been since her world had burned down around her. Sias had been true to his word. She hadn't come to harm since her arrival. In fact, she'd been treated well, albeit isolated in this room. The knock came again. Ovette. Come in, she said, her voice trembling as she sat down on the bed. Sias entered, carrying a fresh tray of food. He set the tray next to the other, not noticing, or deciding not to comment on, the uneaten contents of the previous tray. His stride echoed in the space as he moved, making the room feel smaller, with fewer places to hide. Ovette backed away from his outstretched hand. There's really no reason to fear me, my dear, he said, his voice calm. When are you going to let me go? That won't be happening, he replied, unblinking. His voice, still carrying authority, was layered with subtle sincerity. Ovette was determined to hate this man, determined not to be fooled by kind words. He was her enemy, and no amount of fresh food or promises of safety would ever change that. Ever. Then I have nothing to say to you, Ovette said, turning her back to him. It might have been all the defiance she could offer, but a little pride still filtered through her fear. Why do you hate us Davins so much? He asked. The question took her by surprise. Why would someone like him care about what she thought? It's obvious, she replied, wary of revealing a hidden secret of some sort. Not to me, he said, cold and focused. You're always taking whatever you want, and... She tried her best to channel Cal. What would he say if he were here? You disappear anyone who steps out of line, anyone who doesn't conform to your idea of a perfect citizen. She added as much venom to her voice as she could. She liked the feeling of being defiant. It staved off the helplessness. Is that what Lefestus taught you? That we're all terrible people? Boogeymen who view Udins as bugs to be stepped on? How, how do you know Leif? Ovette asked, nervous about the answer. So much of her world had been shattered. She wasn't sure how much more she could take. Leif and I are very old friends, although I am not so sure he would call us that any longer. Suffice to say, there is a great deal about that man you do not know, and judging by your obvious affection for him, it may be better if you were to never find out. He had to be lying. There was no way Leif would ever call him a friend. He was a Daven. Leif hated the Davens as much as anyone. Didn't he? The Lord Inquisitor stood, handing the old tray of food to the black armored man waiting behind him. Ovette hadn't noticed him until now. He stood motionless, not responding to being handed something as a normal man would. A sense of dread flowed from him. It made him difficult to look at and made Ovette's skin prickle as if touched by frost. And yet, underneath it all, there was something familiar. He scares me, Ovette said, unable to keep the words to herself as she looked at the Theseus's son. Understandable, Theseus replied. He has lost much of what once made him who he was, but my love for him has never waned. He gripped his son's pauldron tight, looking every bit the proud father. What happened to him? It took Theseus a few seconds to answer, the memory painful to relive. There was an incident involving the previous Gyfted. Suffice to say, his sacrifice saved the lives of countless innocents. Yet the ordeal changed him, made him who he is now. Is he dead? She asked, not sure how else to put her feeling into words. It took several seconds for Theseus to answer again, his response carefully chosen. He is not alive. It was difficult to pin down the sensation the son gave off. Ovette's gift allowed her to feel people out. She didn't fully understand how it worked, but she could feel the presence of others, could tune into their emotions. Even Theseus, as guarded as he thought he was, resonated with her. But not his son. He was nothing, like a wound in the gift. Theseus gestured for his son to leave the room, holding the door open for him as he passed through. I'm afraid I shall have to end our discussion here, he said, snapping Ovette's attention back into the room. There is much to prepare for the linking ceremony. The ceremony? Is it going to hurt? Ovette asked, helplessness winning out over defiance. It will. Very much. And for that, I am truly sorry. Theseus replied, bowing low as he spoke. Ovette swallowed hard, her focus wandering again. The pulse and thrum of the gift around her made her head spin. I understand your fear, but consider this. If we Davens are as evil as you say, then you have been given a unique opportunity to show us a better way. I did not lie when I said you were very special, Ovette. Your power could help better the lives of those you love, of all Udens. Is that not worth the pain? Week 2. Cal! Ovette startled awake, the hazy image of Cal lying next to her clinging to her mind. He looked hurt, a broken blade at his side. She coughed against the dryness in her throat, swallowed despite the burning ache in her lungs. Groaning, she sat up, her body protesting every movement. A gentle breeze and the caw of birds snapped her attention to the window. Beyond it, mountains topped with ice jagged the distant skyline. Unfamiliar lakes and rivers, their names unknown, snaked their way between dense forests, the land awash with vibrant blues and greens. He's not here. Cius's voice drew her back into the room, his stone like expression cracked with concern. The memory of Cal faded, replaced by a gnawing in her stomach. Other memories surfaced. A room crumbling around her, the man in black armor carrying her through din and destruction. Is he? She couldn't finish. Saying it aloud might make it true, and Ovette wasn't ready for it to be true. How could she ever be? I believe so. Yes. The Lord Inquisitor bowed his head, and Ovette struggled to breathe. Her tongue felt too big for her mouth, threatened to choke her. No, 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 no. The gnawing spread from her stomach to her chest, hollowing her. We're not sure, but we believe the rebels planned to take your life. It's assumed they believed you to be too dangerous to be kept alive. They. They were. The words caught in her throat. It all felt pointless. These rebels are dangerous. To think they were able to get so close to you that they nearly succeeded. He paused, taking in a deep breath. I'm afraid that's not all. The volcano erupted. Igni is gone. If not for my son. He gestured to the man in black, who responded with stillness. We might both have perished. Cal, Leif, everyone. Nausea swept over Ovette, her skin flushed with heat. Her body trembled. She wanted to cry, to release the pressure building behind her eyes, but the tears felt trapped. It would appear your friend fell in with the wrong people. Whether or not he was aware, he aided in the destruction of half the city, doomed countless citizens to a horrifying fate. Caesar's tone shifted. He kept his composure, but there was no mistaking the disgust in his voice. Dropping to one knee, he clasped Ovette's hands together, holding them tight. I promise you, I will find those responsible. Recognized this travesty. They shall face justice. Her gaze wandered over his features. It was difficult to decide where she should look. The thump of blood in her ears drowned out his words. He stood, gesturing to the man in black armor. I shall give you some space. Ovette's arms shot out before she realized it. Her fingers clamped hard around the cold gauntlet of his armor, her eyes wide and stinging. Please, don't leave. He nodded, then gestured for the man in black to leave once again. As the Lord Inquisitor sat down next to her, Ovette gave in to the weight in her stomach, to the crash of tears that heaved her chest. Month 3. Ovette winced as Clara, a young woman in the service of the Lord Inquisitor, tended to what remained of her wounds. It had been almost a month since the destruction of Igni, almost a month since her world had fallen apart. Her body was healing well, according to Cius and Clara. Little to no scarring, they'd assured her, but some scars ran deeper. Ovette knew that all too well. The door opened and Cius entered, his expression soft, his son trailing behind him. How is she, Clara? Recovering well, I hope. Yes, Lord Inquisitor, Clara replied. She had rosy cheeks, mousy brown hair that curled at the tips, and a softness to her voice that conveyed obedience. That is good news. Now, there's something I must discuss with Ovette. Sia gestured for Clara to leave the room, watching and waiting for the door to click shut. He turned back to Ovette, hands clasped behind his back, his posture ramrod straight. As soon as you're sufficiently healed, I'd like for you to begin your training. My training? Ovette asked, her brow furrowing. More tutelage than training, at least for now. You have much to learn about your powers, where they come from, how best to use them, how to help your people. His excitement betrayed his calm demeanor, enthusiasm quickening his words. I don't want to train. I want to return to Igni. I want to help the people there and look for. Her words trailed off, this thought spiking pain in her chest. The idea still too raw, too painful to voice. The area surrounding Igni is unstable. I understand your desire to help your people, but being there would put you in great danger. You are too valuable to us to lose, Ovette. Ovette had heard this line time and time again over the past few weeks about how precious she was, how important to the future she was. But she didn't feel special or important. She felt weak, helpless, at the mercy of a stranger pretending to be a friend. As if sensing her thoughts, Sia sighed. Look, I know you're tired of hearing me talk about how important you are. You miss your old life, your old family. I understand, more than you realize. But I implore you to think of all the families that need our help, the displaced, the lost, those who need someone to guide them, to show them a better, brighter future. He knelt, coming eye level with her. Let me help you realize your potential. Let us work together to ensure nothing like Igni ever happens to the Uden people again. Ovette didn't know what to say. She wanted to hate this man, wanted to blame him for everything that had happened. But what if he was right? What if the rebels were to blame for the volcano erupting? What if Cal was to blame? You could have a life here, Ovette. One of purpose, one of service to your people. Isn't that what you want? Sia stood, closing the door gently as he did. Ovette sat in the quiet room for a while, Sia's words echoing in her mind. Cal wouldn't have destroyed the city on purpose. Even if he was to blame, it had to have been an accident. He'd always been there for her, always defended her and the littles whenever they were bullied. But was that enough of an excuse? She reached out with her gift, trying to touch his essence, to feel it somewhere, anywhere. Her senses stretched out throughout the spire. Echoes of the gift being channeled rang like a bell in her mind. A cook lighting a fire, a maid utilizing multiple brooms at once. She was connected to all of it, to the ebb and flow of its energy. And something else, too, a presence, older, quieter, but no less potent. Intrigued, she reached a little further and prodded it gently. The presence stirred, and the spire stirred with it. Year 2. Fierce winds buffeted the airship, rattling its frame. Ovette grabbed hold of the handrail of her seat, trying to steady herself and her frayed nerves. Across from her, Sias and his son sat unfazed by the jittering of their craft. This valley is surrounded by fierce winds, Sias called over the howling gusts. We'll soon pass near the chain. The winds will be quieter there. Ovette nodded, though his words were nearly drowned out by the storm. His expression held a mix of amusement and concern, a look she'd grown familiar with over the past 2 years. Cius had been true to his word. Ovette's time at the Spire had been full of study and self-discovery. It had been, and still was, a grueling process, but Ovette loved it. She was thankful for the opportunity to learn more about herself and the origin of her powers. And if the reports coming from the labor camp in Valewind were true, her abilities would be put to the test today. The winds outside began to die down as the airship rose. Valewind's chain loomed into view, its runes glowing a softer green than Igni's tempered orange. Ovette had grown accustomed to sensing the gift within Sanctum Spire, but it still amazed her how different it always felt elsewhere. Her studies had taught her that each chain harnessed a different aspect of the gift: destruction, perception, manipulation. Valewind's chain harnessed manipulation, more commonly known as the gift of the wind. Ovette clutched her chest as she studied the chain, her breath catching. The hum of the gift resonated deep within her, a reminder of the power she was still learning to wield. It had been a long time since Igni's fall, and Ovette would never forget those she had lost. But as Cius often said, we honor those we have lost by doing what we can for those who remain. It was a simple saying, but one that resonated with her. Doing what she could for those who remained felt right, like it was her calling. The airship landed with a soft thud, and the doors hissed open to a field of maimed workers, sprawled across anything big enough to hold them. Ovette took a fortifying breath and set to her task, determined to do what she could to help her people. Excuse me. Little tickle in the back. All right, guys. How are you liking it so far? Barbette, if you happen to still be here, hello. It's good to see you, my friend. Nice of you to stop by. If you're not still here, hey, it was still nice of you to stop by. Sorry, guys. It's going to be one of those kind of nights. Oh, yeah. Are you guys ready? Of course you're here. Yay! It's good to see you, my friend. I hope you're enjoying this reading. I'm really enjoying this book. Checking to see if you needed to pay your Bezos money. I think you're good. I think you're good. Glad to have you here no matter what. Bezos money aside. Always good to see you. All right, guys. Are we ready? You are playing Palia? Palia. All right, guys. Let's go ahead and jump in to our next chapter, shall we? We'll jump into 9. Cal. Cal cursed as the thin metal wire broke, jamming the lock's inner mechanism. He slammed his hand against it, the dull clang drawing yelps and whimpers from several of the cage's occupants. He scowled at the prefect lying at his feet and gave him a kick for good measure. Where's Artie when I need him? He muttered. The sound of boots echoed down the corridor, drawing closer to Cal's position with each second. The caged hollowborn whimpered again, pressing themselves against the back of the cage. Cal's jaw tightened, his scowl deepening. The prefects were drawing close, and Shay and Artie were waiting for him outside. He was already late. Taking a deep breath, Cal drew Leif's blade, jagged and broken, and centered himself. He pushed down against the rise of adrenaline flooding his limbs. Panicked movements never helped. If he wanted to get out of this alive, He needed to remain calm, alert. No one make a sound, he whispered, hoisting the dead prefect up. A quick glance around the corner told him all he needed to know. He kicked hard against the cage door and backed against the opposite wall, the prefect's weight heavy in his arms. What was that? A young voice called out. Footsteps quickened in Cal's direction. Cal counted the seconds before the prefects arrived. As soon as the first prefect came into sight, Cal shoved the dead body into him. The prefect yelped as he crashed into the wall. What the fuck? Cal didn't let the second prefect finish. He drove the tip of the jagged blade into his throat, then yanked the blade free and ran it across the first prefect's throat. To die, grasping at their wounds. Cal stood over them, watching for any signs of life, his breath steady. He wiped his blade on his torn jacket sleeve, the leather worn and the padding frayed. He couldn't remember where he'd gotten it, but even in its current condition, it stopped swords and Gift from taking him out in one go. Good enough for now. Spotting a ring of keys on one of the dead prefect's hips, Cal snatched them and turned back to the cage. Maybe my luck's turning, he said to himself. He unlocked the cage and stepped inside, offering his hand to the cowering Hollowborn. They sank further into the corner, crawling over one another. It's all right. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here to help. He raised his hand to show them the lack of a brand. I'm Hollowborn, like you. Look. But it didn't matter. They were too terrified to move, their squeals intensifying with every step he took. Fine, Cal growled through gritted teeth. Stay here, then. He left the cage door open and made his way to the back of the warehouse, to the rendezvous point Shay had set up. Not everyone was ready to pick up a sword and fight. Undis's Hollowborn were treated worse than Igni's. In Igni, the Hollowborn were only a problem if they got in the way. But here in Undis, folk would be rounded up for even being suspected. How anyone could stand for such treatment was beyond him. But Cal could only do so much for them. If they wanted freedom, they'd have to take it. A contact had leaked information about a shipment of prefect weapons being stored near the docks. Weapons Barkas's rebellion desperately needed. Cal moved through the warehouse with ease, Shay having already cleared any prefects that might have given him trouble. He swung the back door open, greeted by her impatient scowl. You're late, she said, flicking a dagger between her fingers. Got caught up. Nothing to worry about, Cal replied. He didn't look her in the eye as he walked past, instead heading directly for the canal boat that bobbed up and down in the water. Artie waited inside, hunched over and inspecting the gift engine. Artie hadn't changed much since Cal had met him. Even years later, he was still small for his age. Despite everything, he'd retained his youthful naivete. The years had not been so kind to Cal. Not that he cared. His mop of black hair had grown out, long enough to cover his eyes when needed. Constant conflict had shaped his body into something lithe and agile, more weapon than person. It suited him fine. He didn't need anything else, didn't deserve it. It didn't matter how many missions he had to do, how many warehouses he had to raid, prefects he had to go through. Every step brought him closer to his true target. He flexed the ache out of his hand as he took a seat on the boat, the markings from Igni's chain still clear on his skin. He kept the wound bandaged, long past caring why it had never healed. That was the benefit of constant fighting. It had taught him how to deal with pain, taught him how to live with it. Did they see your face? Shay loomed over him, her arms folded tight. Were you seen? I took care of it, Cal replied, not bothering to look up at her. All of them? She pushed, her question laced with accusation. Cal didn't respond. instead choosing to wipe the blood from Leif's jagged blade, making a showing of sheathing it after. His gloating was short lived. Raised voices echoed from the warehouse. The dead prefects had been found. Workers were missing from their cages. Shay shut her eyes and breathed heavily through her nose. Artie, she said through gritted teeth, get the boat moving. Artie jumped to his task, his hand rimmed with green light as he activated the gift engine. The boat juddered to life, easing along the canal. You do, Shay demanded. Old prefects, Cal shot back, matching Shay's frustration. No, we eliminate targets and potential threats. We do not kill anyone we feel like. Cal stood, glowering at her. You know all about targets and potential threats, huh? At least I follow orders. Is that so? Because I remember a time when you took matters into your own hands and ended up destroying half a city. The boat creaked as Shay clenched her fists, her leather gloves straining. The conversation, short as it had been, was over. This wasn't the first ugly conversation they'd had, and Cal suspected it wouldn't be the last. He shoved past her and leaned against the boat's edge, staring back at the warehouse, watching, waiting. Artie asked, glancing back at him. How'd you know? Cal grumbled. Warehouse storage layout. Arms and resources located at the northeast. Makes sense to hold hollow-born laborers at the rear. Ease of transport into or out of the city. Slaves, Artie, not laborers. Indeed. So, did they escape? I don't know. They wouldn't follow me out. Cal's fingers gripped the edge of the boat. They were afraid of me. I am not surprised. You have garnered quite the reputation among Undis's populace, and your visage doesn't exactly inspire. Artie stopped as Cal turned to face him. Ahem. I shall petition Barkis to allow a small team to search for the escapees. The tightness in Cal's chest eased, if only a little. Thanks, Artie, he said, turning back to the warehouse, allowing himself to hope, just for a moment, that the Hullaborns had made it out. Artie, here is good enough, Shay said, signaling for him to cut the gift engine. The canal boat drifted to a lazy halt, its tip bumping against a small wooden dock just a stone's throw away from the warehouse district. Cal, out, Shay said, her tone clipped and no nonsense. What? Barkis will expect a report on what happened. Best you not be at the hideout when I give it. Where am I supposed to go? Cal gruffed, already sheathing his blades and making his way toward the edge of the small boat. Don't know, don't care. Just try not to draw any more attention to yourself. I told you any who saw my face were dealt with, he repeated. Can't take the chance. Can't or won't? Pick one. Out. Cal glared at Shay, searching for something to say that would convey his annoyance. But nothing came to mind. Shay sat back down, turning her back toward him. Uh, Cal? Artie chimed in. By chance, could I run some more tests on those blades of yours? With more time, I'm confident I can discern their origin. Cal considered the request for a moment. Not having his blades left him feeling naked, but he wasn't planning on causing more trouble. Sure, he shrugged, handing both the jagged blade and dagger to Artie. Do your thing. Indeed I shall, Artie beamed, wrapping both blades in cloth and then setting them to one side. He activated his gift, bringing the gift engine to life once more. Shay turned to look at Cal, shaking her head as the boat glided away. Cal waited for a while, watching the boat shrink into the distance. He meandered through the alleyways and back out onto the street, where a crowd of workers flowed around him, uncaring. Weathered men and women in muted overalls, their arms brawny and eyes sunken, hands devoid of a brand, passed by without a glance. They were too focused on their grueling tasks, their lives a cycle of labor and exhaustion. Their lack of attention suited Cal just fine. Less attention meant less trouble. It didn't take him long to find a nearby watering hole. Plenty of such places dotted the workers' district, rowdy at all hours and easy to disappear in. He seated himself at the bar and waved over a dour-looking barmaid. "Ale," he said, smacking a coin on the counter with a thud. "What kind? We got—" "Don't care," Cal interrupted. "Suit yourself," the barmaid replied, rolling her eyes and plopping the coin in the front of her apron. A Vox screen above the bar flared to life, its flickering image drawing Cal's attention. Several officials appeared on screen, shaking hands and patting each other's backs in some self-congratulating ceremony or another. "Here you are," the barmaid said, plunking a tankard of yellow-brown ale in front of him. Cal took a long swig, ignoring the saltwater taste. Ale was ale. It had alcohol. It made him drunk. Helped him forget. No point in being fancy about it. "Citizens of Yundis," a familiar voice boomed through the Vox screen. Cal's fingers tightened around his tankard, the liquid sloshing as his hands shook. He glared at the Vox screen, where the Lord Inquisitor stood behind a podium, arms raised as he addressed the crowd. "It has been 8 years since the attack on the city of Igni. 8 years since the malicious rebellion's attack. We lost many loyal citizens that day. Udins, who embodied our way of life." Cal bit his tongue, ignoring the cheers from the crowd, and forced himself to focus on his drink. The Lord Inquisitor gestured to someone standing beside him, a figure dressed in long, flowing white robes, wearing a golden mask. "Your matriarch, symbol of Udin piety, stands with me. I ask of you, hear her words. Listen to the voice of peace." The matriarch stepped forward, and the roar of the crowd crescendoed for a moment before falling silent. "Good people of Yundis," the matriarch said, her soft voice echoing through whatever augments her mask provided. "It is my greatest wish that this day be one of remembrance, not only for those who lost their lives, but for those of us who remain. Let us remember what it means to be strong, what it means to work as one. I ask this of you, not as your matriarch, but as a citizen who desires peace above all else. We have the power to leave behind a better world for our children. We need only find the strength to look to our neighbor, whomever they may be, and see them as such." The crowd cheered and clapped as the matriarch bowed low and then stepped back behind the Lord Inquisitor. "I invite you all, each and every one, to attend our fair matriarch's upcoming celebration. A night where we show our reverence, our appreciation for her tireless effort." The Lord Inquisitor continued. "I speak not as a Daven, not as your leader, but as a loyal follower of peace and unity. For together we are stronger. Together We can weather any disaster the wolves would set upon us. Cal glanced around the bar. Several patrons held their fists against their chests, their brands glowing. For Davins, for Eudos, for Unity. The bar crowd roared with appreciation. Glasses clinked high in the air, ale spilled, and fists pumped the air. Cal's shoulder jerked as the closest patron shoved his tankard toward him, waiting. What is it? The man slurred. I'm good, Cal shot back, returning his gaze to his drink. You're not gonna celebrate with us? The drink leaned in close, his breath reeking of ale. I just want to drink in peace. Why, you sound kinda all lover or something? Leave me alone, Cal said, his fingers pressing harder against the cold metal of his tankard. Sell me your brand. Come on, show it. By now, the drunk's slurred grunting had attracted attention. Several patrons were looking Cal's way, more than one slowly standing. Show me. Cal jerked his hand as the drunk reached out and smashed him in the face with his tankard. The man hit the floor with a thump. Wooden chairs scraped and tables toppled as several men rushed forward. Cal had played this game before. He hid behind his forearms, waiting for his chance. He kicked a chair into another drunk's legs, elbowed the foreman of a missed punch, and rammed the owner's face into the bar with a wet crack. Pain blazed in the base of his skull as something heavy crashed into him. He stumbled, his hand coming away sticky with blood and ale. An uppercut rammed his guts, doubling him over. Boot heels rained down. What in Yundis's tide is going on here? A voice barked above the din. The rain of blows stopped. Cal squinted through clumped strands of ale-soaked hair at a group of prefects in their cheap armor, the heraldry of Yundis embroidered across blue sashes, their hands resting on sword hilts. Call us one of them hollowborn, one of the drunks said, kicking Cal again for good measure. Cal grunted as they hauled him to his feet. He spat blood at a pair of overshined boots, grimacing as gloved fingers grabbed his chin, lifting his gaze. Every day we find more of your filth in this city, the prefect spat. He had an older voice, one tinged by years of superiority and bigotry. Can't you all do us a favor and die like the rats you are? What do you want us to do with him, sir? Asked a prefect at his side. Throw him in a cell. I've got just the thing in mind for this gutter trash. Cal broke free of the hands holding him and pulled his fist back. Something heavy crashed against the back of his head, and the room spun before going dark. Aw, Cal. Can't ever keep the anger in check, huh? A little freaking fruit fly flying around in my office here. Driving me batty. That's what it's doing. Making me batty. Are you guys ready? Shall we continue on? I believe so. Let's jump into 10. The cell door opened with a dull screech. Cal didn't bother to move. Didn't bother to greet this next round of questioning with the dignity of recognition. His body still ached from the last one. Sooner or later, I'm gonna find you dead in one of these cells, said a familiar voice, pompous and cocksure. Cal sighed in relief. He lifted his head and ran his hand through his hair. Resting his head against the grimy stone wall, he eyed the familiar newcomer. Jord, he said. Jord's brand glowed blue in the cell's dim light. the crack of ice echoing as he directed the light toward a metal canteen in his hand. George tossed the canteen at Cal's feet, the contents sloshing inside as it skittered against the ground. Thought you could use something to drink. Cal popped open the canteen and took several long swigs, the treated water burning his throat as it brought life back to his limbs. Got anything stronger? He spluttered, water dripping down his chin. George snorted with an indignation only one who dined with the upper echelon of society could manage. I'm sure we can find you something. Now come. You've wasted enough time as it is with this little vacation of yours. It was Cal's turn to snort. His aching arms protested as he heaved himself up, leaning against the wall for balance. He wasn't bleeding, at least not at the moment, but he would feel the effects of his visit for a few more days to come. George looked him up and down as he limped over, eyes lingering on several scorch marks. Those look nasty, he said, his voice cold and emotionless, keeping up appearances even here. New recruits, Cal groaned, rotating the ache out of his shoulder. Target practice. Any potents? George asked, his brow raised a touch. Nope. Any new prefect recruit who showed proficiency with the gift was a prime target for the rebellion. Jord, or another more diplomatically inclined rebel, would pay them a visit and discuss the virtues of contributing to a totalitarian control state, as Jord had put it. Failing diplomacy, they would be visited by a different member of the rebellion, someone more like Cal. Either way, the potent would be dealt with. Shame, George said. We could use some fresh blood. Target practice, Cal added, his words as cold as the water he'd just consumed. George didn't reply, instead choosing to lead Cal through the back entrance of the prefect's barracks, away from prying eyes, and toward a canal boat. One markedly different from Shay and Artie's. George's boat ran 3 times the length with gold trimmings adorned on its lacquered wood. Cal rolled his eyes at the waste of coin as he stepped inside. Cost you much to get me out? Cal mused as he donned a fresh set of clothing. As always, George replied, seating himself behind a table in an impractically large booth. Cal paused. His eyes flicked over to George's, before returning to the bottle he'd just retrieved from a cabinet. Thanks. George nodded as the boat started underway. How long have you been back in the city? Cal asked, picking up 2 glasses and gesturing. George nodded again. Got back yesterday. Feels like too long since I've stopped in one place, George replied, accepting a full glass. How did you know where I was being kept? Cal asked, seating himself opposite George. Contacts told me about a group of Hollowborn who'd escaped a warehouse. Rumors of the Chainbreaker coming to their terrifying rescue. Then it was just a case of asking the right people. George swirled the contents of his glass, his gaze steady on Cal. I hate that name, Cal replied, draining his glass. The familiar burn of the alcohol soothed the ache in his muscles. Surprised I let you take me. George emptied his glass and slid it across the table. Lucky for you, the Chainbreaker is a common catch for the prefects. Any Hollowborn that looks mean enough gets scooped up and worked over. The Hollowborn from the warehouse. Were they? Cal paused mid-pour, a lightness in his chest as he let the question hang. Scooped up by yours truly. Appreciate it, Cal said, sliding a refilled glass back to George. I'm sure Barkus will appreciate a new batch of shock troopers. Cal's stomach sank at the thought. Even among the rebellion, Hollowborn were treated like disposable soldiers, good for soaking up gift blasts. A meat shield for the more useful giftlings. Still, it was better than rotting in a cell. George drained his glass and stood, exiting the booth and making his way toward the cabins. He stopped as he passed Cal, gripping his shoulder, firm and reassuring. Get some sleep, Cal. It'll be a while before we're back at base. Soon, Cal said, eyeing the remainder of the bottle. Despite everything, it is good to see you again. Jord placed a small, tattered coin pouch in front of Cal, giving his shoulder one last pat. I'm glad that you're not dead. Cal started at the pouch, his fingers twitching before he reached out for the bottle and said, That makes one of us. The canal boat pulled into a vast underground vault, an enormous platform dominating the center of the space. Several tunnels, waterways, and passageways alike branched out from this platform, leading to the different districts of Yundis. Cal coughed as the reek of stagnant water filled his nose. He'd never quite gotten used to the stench. No one knew when this underground chamber had been built. Intricate patterns and glyphs ran through the stonework, remnants of Uden culture before the Davins, according to Artie. Even Cal had to admit the structure had an element of grandeur to it. Grandeur tinged with regret and loss. Time and abandonment had worn down the edges of the once proud stone, now more pebble-like in their roundness. A fitting place for anyone wanting to be lost or forgotten. You look like shit, Shay said, her arms folded as she waited at the end of the makeshift wooden docks. Found him stinking up yet another cell, Jord huffed, sauntering past her. These breakouts are becoming increasingly costly, Shay. We can probably scrounge up the coin to pay you back. Not that kind of cost, Jord replied, not bothering to look back as he walked away. Shay glared at Cal. That was your idea of laying low? Jail? She said, with the softness of a pissed-off parent. You said I wasn't welcome here. Had to find some place to go. I never said that. I told you to lay low, not end up in a prefect prison. Like it matters, Cal muttered, pushing past her and heading toward the structures ahead. You hate me, don't you? Shay's voice rang with sincerity, a tone Cal had almost forgotten coming from her. No, he replied, trying his best to match her. Not you, I hate. I know you want revenge, but don't go getting yourself killed in the process. We need you. Cal's arm ached as Shay ran her hand against his bicep, her fingers pressing into the tension he never let go of. I still need you. Cal turned to face her, her floral scent filling his nose and stirring memories of grief and the comfort of a bed shared. Memories he'd rather forget. He removed her hand from his arm, his face stone. There was no room for that anymore. Saw his speech on the Vox screen. He's here, in Yundis. Shay swallowed as Cal let go of her hand. I know. Arca sanctioned a hit yet? Shay shook her head. Not yet. He's got something else in mind for us first. Still working out the particulars. Cal mumbled. Anything else? Shay opened her mouth to speak, but closed it just as quickly, her eyes flashing with something Cal couldn't be bothered to figure out. No, nothing else. Good, Cal replied, turning as he talked. I need to get cleaned up. Let me know when you need me. Always do, Shay whispered. Cal removed the clothing he'd taken from George's boat, his wounds seeping as his muscles stretched. Each fresh bruise ached as he applied the last of his ointment. He'd have to make more soon, though asking Shay for help was out of the question. Better to keep his distance. The life of a rebel was short-lived, and Cal expected his to be even shorter. The wound on his left arm pulsed, the pain throbbing through his fingers. Flexing didn't help. The ache was deep. deeper than muscle fibers, deeper than bone. It reached into the ligaments that held everything together. Memories of a crumbling chamber flashed through his mind. Ovette laying inches away, her face pale and still. His chest tightened, the weight of failure pressing down like a stone. His breathing grew labored, each breath harder than the last. His limbs shook, his skin came alive with pinpricks. Heat flushed through his cheeks, and his legs gave out, sending him to his knees. He grasped at the bedsheets, balling them in his fists as he fought to steady himself. Black dots danced at the edges of his vision. It was happening again. Cal clutched at the coin pouch, gripped the old fabric so hard he worried it might tear. He slumped back against the bed, focusing on his breathing, on the pouch, on anything but the memories. The dots faded. His chest lightened. The dizziness subsided. He reached for the hilt of the jagged blade, his fingers brushing empty air. He'd given it to Artie, a decision that now left him feeling exposed. Swallowing hard, Cal stood and donned a fresh tunic. He headed in the direction of Artie's workshop, the coin pouch clutched in his hand. And how y'all doing? You liking the reading? You enjoying yourselves? Hopefully, you all are. That is the hope. That is the dream. That is what we all believe. And now, we dive back in for another read. We'll start ourselves on 11. Cal enjoyed coming into Artie's workshop. Tucked away in the rear of the underground complex, the space was a chaotic mess of tables and half-completed projects. Scratches on the stone floor and chips in the wall told the story of a space once used for purposes far removed from the current bedlam. A thick lump sat in Cal's throat as he meandered through the maze, the chaos reminding him of home. Cal! Artie's voice rang out from across the room as he set down a spherical metal casing. You're back! He rushed over, his enthusiasm undimmed by Cal's disheveled appearance. Whoa, you look, like shit? Cal finished. I've been told. Have you been applying the salve Shay made for you? Perhaps you've exhausted your supply. I shall ask her to mix up a new batch for you. Artie, Cal interrupted. Focus. I'm here about Leif's sword. Ah, yes, of course. Follow. Artie whirled and pottered off toward the forge, which was smaller but no less functional than Huel's. Cal had spent countless hours here, smithing whatever Artie had instructed, losing himself in the rhythm of hammer and metal. I'm afraid little progress has been made, Artie said, removing both the jagged blade and the dagger from a small kiln of his own design. Both blades absorb any gift applied to them. Heat, ice. The rate of absorption depends on the applicant, but the results remain consistent. The composition of the blades also remains elusive, as does their creator. As you know, craftsmen often engrave an insignia on finished pieces, a type of signature, if you will. Your blades. Leif's blades? Cal interrupted again. Yes, Leif's blades bear no such identifying markers. And what does that mean? Isn't it obvious? Artie asked, confused. Cal let out a short breath. Pretend it's not. Very well. Artie rolled his eyes, a gesture that was becoming a more common response in the once timid tinker. Ask yourself this. What other structure bears no craftsman's signature and has the ability to absorb gift? Cal thought for a moment. The chains? Exactly, Artie responded, shoving Cal in the shoulder with excitement. It is my theory that these blades and the chains are all of the same make. Perhaps not made at all. Kel's mind raced. Why would Leif have had something like these? Did he steal them from someone? Did they have something to do with that mysterious benefactor he'd mentioned? A benefactor that Cal had never been able to track down. So the blades are Daven? Cal asked, trying not to sound condescending. Gotta be honest with you, Artie. I'm not seeing why this is so important. It's important because the chains seem all but immune to the martial effects of conventional weaponry. Yet you were able to sever the chain in Igni using that blade. Either you are very special, or these blades hold some significance to the David Empire. Well, it isn't me. I'm Hollowborn, remember? Least of the least. Perhaps, Artie mused, thumb and forefinger gripping his chin. Or perhaps our understanding of the Hollowborn is inaccurate. An uncomfortable silence followed. The last thing Cal wanted was to be important, to be needed again. He cared about one thing and one thing only. Artie waved off the comment. Pure conjecture. Without further evidence, such musings are inconsequential. Now, I assume you also came here for more practice? He gestured toward an open area of the chamber where a ring of sand covered the stone floor. Scuff marks and miniature dunes bore testament to Cal's diligent practice, and gift marks scorched the walls and floor, scores of failures and successes alike. Cal rolled his shoulders, loosening the tension, and kneaded sore muscles with his fingers. He cared little for intellectual musings, content to let Artie and Jord tackle that arena. But before him stood an arena he was very much at home in, each step as comforting as coming home after a long absence. Yeah, still don't have the timing right. Agreed, Artie nodded. Your deflection rate thus far has been less than optimal. Thanks, Cal answered derisively. Ah, but I'm sure you'll improve with diligent practice. Good save, Cal said, as he stopped at the far end of the small arena. Artie gestured for one of his aides to stand at the opposite end. Cal sheathed his dagger and held the jagged blade in an open stance. He focused on his breathing. In, out. Calm. Aware. He loosened his limbs, grounded his feet, the nervous energy he felt before a fight, ready to be commanded. Cal, are you ready? Artie asked. Cal nodded in response. Good. He turned to his assistant, who looked nervous as she faced Cal. Carell, same as before. Channel your gift and fire in at Cal. Nothing too lethal, understood? She nodded in quick succession, her brand already starting to glow. All right. Artie held his hands in the air before dropping it. Begin. Cal winced at the fresh sear on his shoulder, a reminder that even his best deflection hadn't been enough to avoid Carell's gift entirely. The stone behind him smoked, a fresh scorch mark announcing his partial success. Artie gingerly applied an ointment to the fresh wound, the medicinal herbs stirring a wave of nostalgia that Cal tried to push down. Your reaction times are improving, Cal, Artie said, finishing up with the ointment. Quite the impressive feat for one with no ability to sense the gift. Still not fast enough, Cal grunted, wincing all over again as Artie covered the fresh injuries with a bandage. I need more practice. Do me a favor and ask Shay for more of her ointment. Where she learned the recipe is beyond me, and my repeated attempts at inquiry are all met with the same result. Artie scoffed, his annoyance evident. Ask her yourself, Cal replied, his tone flat. Ah, you two are still at odds with one another, I take it, Artie inquired. That's none of your business. Team unity and the morale that follows such an ideal has an influence on all of us, Cal. You may not like it, but this divide between Shay and yourself affects more than just the two of you. I'd say that it is very much my business. Assuming, of course, that we are all still a team. Look, it's just complicated, okay? Shay and I are. Shay and I are what? Both Cal and Artie jerked their heads toward the workshop's entrance. Shay leaned against the doorframe, casually picking at her fingernails. Shay and I are fine, Cal finished. Good to hear, Shay said, her gaze locked onto Cal. To a stranger, the tension between them would be imperceptible, but it was there, sat just below the surface, dark and silent. Father wants a word with you. Why me? Cal replied, adjusting his clothing to cover his latest bandage. Got a new mission. Won't tell me anything about it until you're there, too. You know how he hates to repeat himself. Cal gave a curt nod in response and patted Artie on the shoulder, gripping it tight before letting go. Good workout, Artie. A pleasure as always, Cal. Cal cherished the simple relationship he had with Artie. No nonsense, no deceit, just mutual respect and understanding. Artie saw him as an oddity, something to be understood rather than feared. In a life built on secrecy and lies, Artie was a breath of fresh air. Shay, on the other hand, was another matter altogether. It was impossible for Cal not to notice the woman she'd grown into. Even now, as he followed her through the stone complex to Barkis's war room, he took in the curve of her figure, the habitual sway of her hips, her shoulder-length hair, cut short enough for practicality, but just long enough to add a touch of femininity to its bounce. But this was the problem. Shay was crafted. She knew what she looked like, and she used it to her advantage. Even her own body. After all these years, Cal still didn't feel like he knew the real her. It happened again, didn't it? Shay said, breaking the silence. I don't know what you're talking about, Cal replied, wishing for any other topic. Shay stopped. She grabbed Cal's arm and held him back, her grip firm but not harsh. Yes, you do. You always train after. She gestured at Cal's shoulder. Always push yourself too far. The moment stretched on, awkward and heavy. Cal shifted in Shay's grasp. It helps the shaking, he admitted, not daring to meet her eyes. And the nightmares? She asked, stepping closer. Closer than they'd been in a while. Cal shook his head, not having the right words. Shay was the only other person who knew, the only other person who'd seen. He hated that she knew how weak he really was. But what's more, he hated that she tried to help. She was wasting her time. No saving what he'd become. I know things are different between us now, but. She placed her hand on his chest, pushing against it with the gentleness only a lover could achieve. I'm here for you, whenever you're ready. Cal took his hand in hers, took her hand in his, moved it gently away, steeled his gaze and met hers. I can't. She took a step back, sighed to herself, and smiled. The first smile she'd given Cal in what seemed like forever. I know. Come on, let's not keep my father waiting. The war room was silent. Barkis and the other rebels stared at an object on the large wooden table, their expressions a mix of curiosity and unease. George stood at the opposite end, arms folded, his gaze fixed on Barkis. What is it? Barkus asked, not taking his eyes off the object.
Latest Daven weapon, Jord replied. Soon to be in the hands of every prefect throughout the Empire.
Cal and Shay joined the table, their eyes drawn to the strange weapon. It was a long, carved piece of wood, bent and shaped at one end with a small hole in the other. Metal fastenings gripped the bent end, and a palm-sized metallic disc etched with runic symbols sat in the flat of the wood. To Cal, it didn't look all that dangerous. Maybe useful for clubbing someone over the head with, but he preferred sharp slices to loud thunks. What's it called? What does it do? Barkus continued, rubbing his thick, grizzled beard. Barkus had grown broader since Cal had first known him. Not in fat or girth, but in sheer build. Years ago, Cal had thought of him as a mighty oak tree, his arms broad and thick. Now the barrel of his chest and the burl of his arms made him look like a fortress unto himself. He commanded respect wherever he went, his presence as imposing as the thud of his boots. Barkus was a doer. He inspired folk and didn't shy away from getting his hands dirty. Even Cal had to respect that.
I'll spare you that technical name, George said, trying not to sound condescending, though the prefects have started calling it a gift arm. It uses the gift to fire a small metallic ball bearing at incredible speeds, far more effective than the average giftling fire flinger.
That include you? Barkus asked, his tone challenging. Jord adjusted his breastcoat, tugging at the well-crafted lined material. Jord never liked to be outdone in anything. He prided himself on his ability to turn his hand to whatever the matter required, and Barkus's question clearly rankled him.
It pains me to admit it, George said, his voice tight. But yes, even one as talented as I pale in comparison to this Fang's capabilities.
Show us, someone called out from the crowd. Barkus's eye flicked in the direction of the voice, silencing further outbursts, but he didn't reject the request. Instead, he turned his gaze back to Jord and nodded his approval. Jord picked up the gift arm, nestling the bent end against his shoulder and placing his brand hand on the metallic disc. He turned, pointing the shot away from everyone, and activated his brand. It flared to life, quick and hungry, the metallic disc glowing bright red as it pulled energy from Jord's palm. The gift shot through the metal casings lining the wood, and with a deafening crack, the weapon discharged. Jord's shoulder jerked back from the recoil, and a section of the wall on the opposite end of the room exploded. Ancient stone sprayed outward, leaving behind a small crater. The room fell silent, everyone too stunned to speak. Jord nursed his shoulder as he set the gift arm back on the table.
Weapons such as these will turn even the most inexperienced prefect into a deadly threat,
he said, his gaze sweeping the room. How many did you bring with you? Barkus asked. He was the only one who hadn't jumped at the explosion.
Just this one, Jord replied. It was all I could get my hands on.
Blast, Barkus barked.
I do, however, come with some good news, although that depends on your interpretation of the word good,
George said, pausing to ensure he had the room's attention.
A contact in the underworld has a reputation for acquiring the unacquirable. I have his assurances that he can provide us with a crate of these new weapons.
What's his price? Shay asked, her gaze boring a hole in Jord. She knew full well that such a price would make each and every person in the room uncomfortable. Jord looked back at her for a moment before turning his head toward Cal.
Him.
Me? Cal said, as surprised as anyone. What does he want with me?
He wishes to meet the Chainbreaker, Jord replied. As to why, I do not know.
Barkus grunted. So that's why you broke the mutt out of his latest cage.
Precisely, George continued. I'll make contact with Quentin first. He's dealt with my contact before. He should be of use.
No point, Barkus replied, his voice flat. Quentin's cell has gone dark.
Scout reports?
Jord asked, his words clipped and tinged with panic. Can't spare the manpower, Barkus replied, eyes narrowing as he studied Jord's reaction.
I'll go myself,
Jord said. Barkus glanced at Cal, chewing on his cigar. The scent of dried herbs filled the air, sharp and pungent. No, you don't need him. This contact of yours wants to meet one person, and one person only. Keep it light, keep it simple. There was little emotion in Barkis's words, but that was how a leader was supposed to be. Barkis lost rebels every day. Everyone knew the risks. Shay, Jord, take your dog for a walk. Go meet with this weapons dealer and do whatever he asks. We need these weapons if we intend on staying in this fight. And if I say no? Cal shot back, his hands balled into fists. The idea of being passed around like some cheap whore in the embers churned his stomach and stoked the burn in his chest. The small crowd parted as Barkus stomped toward Cal, his sheer presence as imposing as a moving mountain. He loomed over Cal, at least a head taller, the billowing scent of dried herbs reminding Cal of another fat asshole he used to hate. You'll do as you're told, mutt. He jabbed a finger to Cal's chest. The impact felt like a punch, knocking the wind out of him, but Cal stood firm and planted his heels. And you'll be thankful that someone has found a use for you. Good dogs do as their master bids them. Cal huffed, forced his breathing to slow. He gritted his teeth to stop the trembling of his jaw. Don't think I wasn't told of the mess you made, Barkus continued, jabbing Cal again. You're wearing your welcome mighty thin. You best hope this deal goes well, or I'll turn you over to the prefects myself. I hear the bounty on the chainbreaker is pretty high these days. He blew a final cloud of smoke in Cal's face. Get the scap out of my sight, blasted hollowborn. Cal stood defiant, determined not to let Barkus gain any ground. He refused to let this oaf think he had any sway over him. A gentle hand clasped his arm, tugging him away. Come on, Cal, Shay said, her expression insistent. Let's go. The sooner we start, the sooner we're back. Shay pulled Cal from the room. Jord followed on her heels. Jord rushed toward his canal boat, shoving through anyone in his path. Jord, Shay called out, offering an apologetic gesture to the rebel he'd practically bowled over. Wait.
I can't. Quentin might need my help,
Jord huffed, his face reddening with each step. I get that you're worried about him, Shay said, catching up. But would you at least tell me why we need him? George stopped, his canal boat bobbing in the murky water just ahead. His shoulders dropped as he turned around, wearing an expression caught between embarrassed and annoyed.
My contact, the man who wants to meet Cal in person, is Dredge.
Shay rolled her head and threw her hands up in the air. Oh, you have got to be kidding me.
Who's Dredge?
Cal asked. A piece of flotsam with delusions of grandeur. Sharp contempt punctuated Shay's tone. Think of something illegal, or just downright shady, and Dredge has had his fingers in it.
We're not going to beat the Davins playing by the rules, Shay, Jord countered. We have to get our hands dirty.
You mean I have to get my hands dirty? Cal asked, raising his eyebrow at Jord.
Well, yes, given your penchant for violence, Cal, I didn't think you'd be so opposed to the idea,
Jord replied. Never said I was. I just don't like being passed around. That's all.
a sentiment not shared by many,
George said, his tone matter of fact.
As effective a combatant as you may be, you're still a hollowborn. And the most, that's all you are.
It had been a long time since George had described Cal as such, and part of him seethed at the thought of being traded like one of George's commodities. But Cal understood what George was trying to say, or at least he thought he did. What does Quinton have to do with any of this? Shay interjected, bypassing the Hollowborn comment.
Quentin has dealt with Dredge a number of times. He has established a working relationship with the man already. Considering I have no clue what he wishes Cal to do, and Dredge's well earned reputation, I would rather enter negotiations with as many advantages as possible. Wouldn't you?
George spoke quickly, powering through his points, his gaze flicking between Shay and Cal.
Now, Quentin So could have just gone silent. It's not unheard of. But we all know the prefects are stepping up their patrols.
He stepped forward, tilting his head and lowering his voice.
I'll meet you both outside Dredge's warehouse. Damn what Barkus says. I won't abandon Quentin.
Cal stepped past Jord, patting him on the shoulder before boarding the canal boat.
What are you doing?
Jord asked, surprise spreading across his face. Can't fight a prefect hit squad in this, Cal said, pointing to his linen shirt. Comfortable as it may be, it wouldn't hold up against gift fire or a blade. Do you have anything in black? George smiled, dipping his head for a moment with his hands on his hips.
Thank you, Cal. This means a lot to me. I owe you for this.
Oh, you owe me plenty already, Cal said with a wink, heading into the boat's hold. Shay followed behind, shaking her head with her hands in the air. She flashed Jord a smirk as she walked past him. Someone's got to keep an eye on him. Take the dog for a walk, remember? She hopped onto the boat and stood in the doorway to the hold. Father didn't say where to walk him. I don't know what fell down and made noise around here, but something fell down and made noise in my office. All right, guys, chapter 11 done. We'll start into chapter 12 momentarily. And momentarily has arrived. Here we go with 12. The canal boat bobbed along Undis's waterways, its man made tributaries crisscrossing throughout the city, stitching the islands together. Travel along them was restricted to merchants and the social elite, not by decree, but by the weight of commerce or social standing. Towpaths ran in parallel with the waterways, their industrial use long since forgotten. Now they connected the districts, each a cluster of buildings on their own miniature islands. Here in the tideway, the roar of the maelstrom that sat beneath Undis's citadel thrummed through the air. Cal sat rigid at the prow of George's oversized canal boat. He'd again raided George's wardrobe, this time claiming a long black coat that hugged his frame but left room to move. The perfumed leather itched at his nostrils, a small price to pay for the disguise and the modicum of protection it provided. To any observer, he'd look like some noble's hired blade, the kind too paranoid to trust the prefects. A scuffle erupted on the nearest island. Several prefects, their armor darker than that of igneous, hues of blue and silver, dragged two shopkeepers into the streets, hurling them onto the white cobblestones. Other citizens knelt, their hands behind their heads or pressed to their faces like shields. Cal stood, foot on the lip of the canal boat, ready to jump. The gap was still too wide, but closing. Don't, Shay barked, watching the display of organized brutality. Her eyes weren't alight with the same fire as Cal's. Hers burned with hatred and contempt. If you get involved, you'll only make it worse for them. So I just sit here and watch it happen? Just like everyone else? He jerked his chin toward the faces crowding every window, silent witnesses. Yes. Her tone was clipped, the word pushed out rather than said. Cal turned away with a scoff. Sometimes saving the day only makes the next one worse. Cal shut his eyes, but the shopkeeper's pleas swelled as the boat drew closer. His whole body trembled with the need to do something, every fiber demanding action. But his chest burned with the realization that he could do nothing.
Prefects have stepped up their patrols in the district,
Jord murmured, barely audible over the distant din of the maelstrom.
Any association, even a neighborly rumor, is being treated as full treason. This does not bode well for the hideout.
Quentin's or my father's? Shay asked, a challenge to her tone.
Both,
George said frankly. My father placed the illusion around the hideout himself. There's no way the average prefect would be able to find it.
Not on their own, no, countered Jord. Our little rebellion is losing its foothold in the city, hideouts and hearts alike. The rebellion is crumbling. A single slip, a cornered ally, a loose tongue. It's over.
Shay looked down, her expression dour, her brow furrowed. We're wasting time, Cal snapped. If what George says is correct, then we need to hurry. George nodded and vanished into the cabin. The boat lurched forward, its sudden speed making Cal sway. He glanced back one last time. A prefect dragged an older-looking shopkeeper away by his collar. The man was in the twilight years of his life, judging by his graying hairs and almost comically bushy mustache. Cal's chest dropped as he surveyed the brutality, and he offered the man a silent apology, lamenting the piece of himself that fell away. Then he turned away, fists clenched, wrinkling his nose at the perfumed leather of his coat. The moment George's boots hit the damp cobblestone, Cal shifted into action. He didn't sprint and scramble like his colleague. Urgent didn't mean careless after all. George skidded to a halt in the smashed entrance of a tavern. Rotten wood and broken window panes lined the outside, some newer, with shards of glass littering the ground beneath them, others older, lined with white dots of dried sea salt. Cal joined him in the doorway. The stench hit first. In some ways, it smelled like any other lower city tavern. Ale, sweat, an honest day's work mixed with an honest evening's brawl. But a brawl didn't leave the scent of iron in the air. It didn't leave the flooring, the stools, or the wet bar covered in blood. Jord gagged, pressing a perfumed glove to his nose, but Cal stepped past him. The room was a slaughterhouse. Overturned stools, blood smeared in arcs where the dying had crawled, the drip of ale from a spilled tankard punctuating the silence. Cal inspected the first corpse, a precise cut across the throat. Professional. Clean. The next was messier, a gut wound, the victim's fingers clenching his own entrails. Near the back room, the kills changed. Clothing fused to blackened skin, faces, well groomed and lacking the pale hue of prolonged malnourishment, locked in silent screams. Their brands still glowed faintly under cracked flesh. Cal closed the eyes of the more destitute looking corpses and passed a scornful gaze over the others. Shay slipped in behind him, her careful footfalls avoiding the stickiest patches. She didn't flinch or react as Jord had. Are we too late? She asked, though her tone said she already knew the answer. Cal didn't answer. He tracked the puncture marks in the walls, thin, precise, angular. Blade strikes, not a brawl, a massacre. A dull thud came from the back room. Cal's jagged blade cleared its sheath before the sound faded. He kicked the door open and found a boy, younger than Artie if the wisps of hair on his chin were any indication. Blood soaked through his clothes, and he struggled to breathe under the corpse that lay on top of him, the pointed end of a blade sticking through its back. Cal helped the dying boy free, and he took in a long breath, punctuated by a series of fitful wet coughs. The blackened skin of his right hand cracked like splintered wood as he coughed, the pulsing of his brand fading. Shay! Cal called out, wiping the man's mouth. He didn't have long left. The boy's lips moved, blood burbling. Quentin. He. Where is he? Where's Quentin? Cal frowned as the young man jerked and gasped for air. He saw. The words died in the man's throat. His gaze lost its focus as his head slumped forward. No, Cal whispered, closing the boy's eyes. He didn't look up as he heard Shay appear behind him. Is he? Shay asked, her tone matching her grim expression. He's gone. Cal laid the dead man down on the floor and sheathed the jagged blade. This wasn't your fault, Cal. Nothing anyone could have done, Shay said, trying her best to sound empathetic and practical all at once. We should have gotten here sooner. Cal didn't look at Shay when he answered. He knew his answer wasn't realistic. Knew that if they'd gotten here in time, they'd likely be among the dead. But the fact didn't make him feel any better. Didn't make the guilt easier to bear. Another life had been lost because Cal wasn't fast enough. We need to be careful. Chances are the place is still being watched. Shay continued, ignoring Cal's comment, not giving air to his pity party. George stumbled in, his face pale, perfumed glove still held to his nose. I can't find Quentin. He's not among the bodies, he blurted out. Is there anywhere he might be? Shay asked. George's gaze fell on the dead boy. I knew this boy. DeWitt something. He didn't deserve this. None of them deserved this. He turned, wobbling slightly as he made his way outside. Cal and Shay followed, neither of them surprised when Jord doubled over and retched. It's okay, Jord. Shay rubbed his back gently, softening her tone. If Quentin isn't here, then he might still be alive. We can still help him. But you need to tell us where he might be. Think. Cal's tone wasn't as soft as Shay's, and his remark earned him a sideways glance from her. I'm okay, George said, holding his arm out and pushing Shay away. I know where Quentin will have gone. I've a warehouse a few streets from here. He pointed in the direction of the swell, the back end of the Tideway district. It houses the trinkets I picked up in my travels. It's where we'd go to be alone. Together. Cal gave Jorda a curt nod. Keep up, and sprinted off in the direction of the swell. Cal crouched at the alleyway's mouth, knees pressing into damp cobbles as he waited for Shay and Jord. His gaze locked onto a small unit of prefects, 4 of them in total, studying their formation as they guarded the warehouse. He tilted his head, straining to hear any sound from the warehouse. Sounds of struggle, the lash of gift fire. Nothing. The warehouse loomed silently, the wrong kind of silence. Shay skidded into a crouch next to Cal, George stumbling behind, his breath heavy. And anything? Shay asked, taking in the scene. Nothing. Simple guard formation. I count 4 so far. Likely more inside, Cal replied. Shay turned to Jord, her hand steadying his trembling shoulder as he fought to quiet his heaving breaths. How many entrances to this place are there?
Front and back, Jord panted. It's too quiet. We need to hurry.
He moved to exit the alley, but Cal shoved him into the wall. Not yet, Cal whispered with a grunt.
We're wasting time just sitting here,
Jord protested, his face flushed crimson from frustration or embarrassment. Cal didn't care why. He knew diving in without much of a plan would be suicide. Exactly what the Davins wanted. Something about this whole thing felt off. The prefect stood too still. No shifting feet, no bored chatter. Bait. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as he eyed the nearby rooftops, scanning for hidden assailants. Jord, we need to be careful, Shay said, her tone soft again. We need to make sure we don't do this half-cocked. Something feels off about this whole thing.
What are you talking about?
Shay didn't answer. Her gaze drifted back to Cal. There were some things a soft voice and gentle touch weren't suited for conveying. Do you trust Quentin? Cal asked, his gaze still arrow-focused on the prefects ahead. George swallowed hard.
With my life, Cal.
Cal turned to Jord, studied his earnestness, the desperation, the loyalty, and exhaled hard. All right, fine. If we're doing this, then we're doing it fast. He snapped his head toward Shay. I could buy you both a few minutes. Make sure our friends over there have something to play with. Meanwhile, you get in, get Quentin, and get out. I'll join you when I'm done. You sure you're not going to need my help? Shay replied. Cal shook his head and jerked his chin toward Jord. He'll need it more. Shay gave a single, slow nod as her response. All right. See you on the other side, handsome. Cal allowed the corner of his mouth to curl into the barest smirk. As always. Shay's brand ignited, mottled gray gift slithering up at her arm like smoke. When the shadows swallowed them whole, Cal drew his blades and stepped into the light. His grip tightened on the hilts, and he welcomed the familiar pre-fight buzz as it thrummed in his veins. Oi! Oh, what a good place to stop for the evening. No, we got to finish on to keep on going with the fight? I think you guys might be right. Fine, we'll keep on going. We'll do at least one more chapter. Can't leave off here. Do we think the Lord Inquisitor might be inside the warehouse? Waiting, watching, searching. I guess we'll find out, won't we? When we start reading. 13. Cal sprinted forward, ducking right as a bolt of gift fire seared past his cheek, the flames licking his skin. He pivoted, shoulder twisting, and flung his chest back just in time to sail over a second bolt. The awkward landing sent a jolt up his shins. It forced him to slow his pace. Gritting his teeth, he regained his footing. A third bolt soared toward him. No time to move out of the way. Cal sucked in a breath and swung the jagged blades flat side into its path. The gift fire ricocheted with a crackling snap, exploding into the ground a few feet away. The prefects let out a trio of gasps, one stumbling back a few steps. What the? Did he just? A prefect stammered. Tide, take me! It's him! Cal didn't give them the chance to recover, didn't allow himself to savor the deflection. He continued his sprint, and the moment he got within range, he stamped his foot, spun low, and drove the jagged blade into the first prefect's side. Before the man could scream, Cal rammed his dagger into the prefect's throat, silencing him with a gurgle. Pain blazed in Cal's shoulder as another firebolt clipped his shoulder, the impact wrenching him sideways. His grip slipped from the hilt of the jagged blade. His leather armor smoked, having absorbed most of the impact, but the heat still seared his flesh. Cal snarled, grabbed the hilt of his blade again, and hauled the dead prefect upright. The corpse's weight strained his arm as gift fire thudded into it. With a roar, Cal charged, slamming the body into the second prefect. The man went down hard, helmet clattering against the cobblestones. Cal wrenched his blades free, pivoted, and stabbed. Once, twice, into the standing prefect's stomach and chest. Onyx steel punched through the blue and silver armor like paper, and the man crumpled, blood frothing at his lips. The last prefect flailed beneath his dead comrade, legs kicking. His brand flickered, too panicked to channel the gift. Cal stared down, savoring the fire in his veins, the adrenaline in his muscles. With the jagged blade flipped in his hand, Cal rammed it through the throat of the deceased prefect. With ease, the blade punctured dead and living flesh alike. The floored prefect wailed and sputtered, his panicked expression falling slack, his alert eyes losing focus. With one last look of contempt, Cal jerked the blade free and dashed into the warehouse. Cal pumped his legs, sprinting through the corridors. He had no idea where he was going, but that didn't matter. From the outside, the warehouse hadn't looked that large. It wouldn't take him long to run into his friends or another prefect patrol. Either would do. Rounding a corner, he slowed his pace and cast his gaze around the large open room. The room felt empty, despite the large iron drums that stood to the left. Gift canisters. Cal rapped his knuckle on the nearest canister. Empty. Above, a metal walkway coiled toward a foreman's office. Voices from further across the space carried over to Cal. Panicked voices accompanied by the jostle of armor-clad footsteps. As silently as he could, Cal clambered up the space between the iron canisters, using both to brace himself. The shadows under the walkway swallowed him as three more prefects entered the space. How many are there? The most panicked-looking prefect asked. He was young. His voice squeaked with inexperience as he spoke, and he held his sword hilt at the wrong angle. He would be the first to fall. Next to him, a helmeted prefect scanned the room. His armor fit slightly better, the leather straps worn in, shaped to his shoulders. The helmet added a rasp to his breathing. No idea. District's crawling with the scum. The last prefect removed his helmet and ran a hand through his thick, well-groomed beard. Cal studied his posture, straight, but not stiff, his breathing calmer than his cohorts. A sword hung on the left side of his belt, his right hand ungloved, his brand glowing. This last prefect was more experienced than the other two, likely a prefect captain. Definitely a challenge. What should we do, sir? Squeaked the young prefect. Reports of a lone rebel at the front entrance. He has already taken out 3 of our men. We're their backup, the experienced prefect barked back, more of a reminder than an answer. As quietly as he could, Cal cut off the topmost wooden clasp of his leather armor, adjusted his position for purchase and aim, then threw the clasp at the iron canister furthest away from his position. The clasp hit the canister with a clang. All three prefects spun, brands flaring. "Swords up!" barked the captain. The young prefect jumped at the order, almost dropping his blade. "Riles, take the corridor. Sten, go see what that noise was." "Right," Sten squeaked, inching toward the last iron canister on the row while his comrade made for the corridor Cal had just come from. Cal latched his fingers into the walkway above and made his way over the tops of the canister, legs first, moving as slowly as the situation would allow. He almost felt sorry for Sten as he lowered himself back to the floor. The young prefect trembled, waving his sword back and forth as if he was trying to swish away the danger. "Sten, anything!" the captain called from the other end of the row of canisters. "Nothing here, sir," Sten called back, turning as he spoke. Cal shot forward and grabbed hold of the young prefect, one hand covering his mouth to muffle the scream, and dragged him back into the shadows. He ripped a small dagger out of the boy's belt and plunged it into his neck. Sten kicked out the last of his life, his boot finding purchase with the canister. Cal hissed, tossed the body to the side, and clambered back up, not caring about making noise. "Sten!" the bearded prefect called out. "Riles, bring that canister down!" Metal shrieked as Riles's gift wrenched the canister beneath Cal apart. Cal toppled forward. He grunted as he hit the ground, a shard of broken metal biting into his leg. The destroyed canister sent up a large cloud of dust, forcing Cal back. "There he is!" the captain snarled, drawing his sword and flaring his brand. Cal rolled as gift fire exploded against the ground. Heat blistered his back, the blast stronger than usual, more focused. The captain was a potent. Scrambling to his feet, Cal grabbed a piece of broken metal and hauled it in front of him. A second potent blast hit the metal dead center, throwing Cal back against the wall and knocking the air out of him. "Got you!" The captain loomed over Cal, his sword raised for the kill. "Rebel scum!" Cal hooked the man's ankle, yanking him down. Bringing himself to his knees, he leaped forward and plunged the jagged blade in the prefect's gut, then chest, using each strike to pull himself forward. Dull emptiness replaced the rage and terror of the captain's gaze. Riles roared with anger. He rushed toward Cal, his outstretched hand lined with twirling wisps of green. The jagged blade jutted ever so slightly in Cal's hand, and he chuckled to himself at the futility of the act. "Want it?" he said calmly. "All yours." He drew back his arm and threw the jagged blade at the prefect, hitting dead center. Riles grasped at the hilt sticking out of his chest before crumpling to the floor. The adrenaline of the moment passed. Pain lanced through Cal's body, his limbs and muscles sore from impacting with the wall. He arched his back, hearing the pop and crack of a few bones. Nothing broken. He looked down at the gouge across his leg. Nothing that needed immediate attention. No reason for him to slow down. New shouts echoed from deeper inside the warehouse, along with yelps and gift blasts of another fight. Cal's chest fluttered, but he steeled himself and set off toward what he hoped were his friends. The shouting faded as Cal sprinted through the warehouse. Though he knew Shay and Jord could handle themselves, ice-cold tendrils ran down his spine, drowning out the burn in his leg. When gift fire exploded around the next corner, he pushed harder. His shoulder flared with pain as he slammed into the wall, using the impact to rebound around the bend. Physical pain was easier than losing another friend. He found Shay crouched over Quentin, dabbing at the blood masking half his face. His tailored jacket hung in tatters, its gaudy embroidery sliced to ribbons. Jord paced nearby, his posture reduced to a nervous hunch. "Jord!" Cal called out, skidding to a halt. Jord whipped around and fired before Cal could blink. Gift fire grazed his temple before igniting a stack of wooden crates nearby.
Oh, Cal!
Jord said, his eyes wide and chest heaving.
Sorry.
Cal glanced back at the burning crates. You need to work on your aim. Ah, Cal. Quentin winced as Shay applied ointment across a weeping gash bisecting his torso. As grand an entrance as always. A bloody grin accompanied his mock salute. That looks bad, Cal said, nodding toward Quentin's wound. This, nothing more than a flesh wound. I'm more concerned about the coat. Quentin plucked at the ruined fabric. Do you have any idea how much this cost me? I really have no idea, Cal replied, rolling his eyes and allowing his body to relax. And I really don't care either. Well, you can rest assured that as soon as the lovely Miss Shea here is done pampering me with her gentle touch, I shall be fit to deal with the reprobates outside. Quentin huffed as Shea pushed down his attempt to stand, giving her a wink and another dastardly smile. No need, Cal said. They've been dealt with. Quentin's head jerked back. 7 prefects? Alone? Even one as talented in doling out death such as yourself would balk at the idea of facing down 7 prefects, all by your lonesome. His tone was more playful than serious. 6 prefects, Cal said, staring back, his expression in no way matching Quentin's. Cal slowed his breathing as he waited for Quentin to respond. He'd not met this man many times, but each had left an odd taste in his mouth. He didn't dislike Quentin. Not really. But he didn't like him either. It was beyond Cal how Jord could spend more than 5 minutes talking to him. Shay stood, wrapping what few medicinal items she'd brought in a cloth, and nodded to Jord. Jord immediately dropped to Quentin's side. He cradled his face and placed a long kiss on his forehead.
I thought I'd lost you.
Oh, Jord, it's going to take more than a few prefects to tear me away from you. Quentin's tone shifted from playful to something else, bordering on sincerity, but not quite there. Cal eyed him, frowning as he tried to figure out what was bothering him. How did they find you? Shay asked, receiving a glare from Jord, as if this wasn't the time to be asking him questions. Shay ignored him. How did you end up here? Quentin gestured for Jord to help him stand. How they found me, I've no clue. But as soon as the fighting started, I knew they'd be after me. Not my men. So I led Undis's finest on a merry chase through the swell. He held up his arm, smiling despite his obvious pain. And as you can see, my plan was a rousing success. Although I am glad for your assistance, far too soon for someone as handsome as me to go down in a blaze of glory. Quentin chuckled. Shay and Cal didn't. Your hideout was destroyed. No survivors, Cal said, his words as clipped as his patience. Oh. Quentin's smile faltered. That's... how tragic.
At least you're safe,
George said, resting his head against Quentin's again. Indeed I am. Quentin turned to Cal, mask back in place. I take it you were here for reasons other than my general well-being. Do not get me wrong. I am extremely grateful for your assistance. However, I doubt one with Cal's reputation is all of the sudden making house calls. Actually, we're here because of that reputation, Shay answered, throwing Cal a look. An underworld crime boss wants to meet with him. Quentin chuckled, holding his fingers against his chest. And how does this involve me exactly? You know the man we're meeting. Name of Dredge. Quentin leaned back, his eyes wide like a character in a pantomime. Dredge is a serious player in the underwell. More so than our little ragtag group of pluck and spit adventures has any experience in dealing with. It's a good thing you came to me. Great. Lead us to him, and you can consider us even for saving you. Cal grunted, wanting nothing more than to be moving on. Pray tell, dear Cal, why does Dredge want to meet with you? What could one of the most influential crime bosses in Undis want with a lowly hollowborn? Cal rolled his eyes as Shay looked his way. Cal is the chain breaker, Shay said, stepping in front of Cal. Quentin's brow extended further than before, his mouth open and slack, like a group of old fisherwives hearing the latest juicy piece of gossip. Him? My, you are just full of surprises, aren't you? I'm sure you hear this all the time, but how did you do it? How did you cut the chain? Cal flexed his hand. The wounds left by the chain pulsed as if they were suddenly paying attention. Images flashed through his mind. The ethereal chain wrapped around his arm, Ovette's still form on the ground. The images were hazy, like trying to remember a dream from days before. His head thumped the more he tried to keep the memories from fading. I don't know, he growled. Can't remember. Can't, or don't want to. Cal scoffed, thinking back to those days was hard enough for him. In the blink of an eye, he'd lost everything. Ovette, his home, the people of the Embers, all dead because of him. Because he wasn't fast enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't enough. Does it make a difference? Cal grunted. I'd say it makes all the difference, my boy, Quentin said with a smirk. The chains of each city are seen as monuments to Daven rule. Removing such monuments would galvanize the people. Even in the face of Igni's destruction, the Chainbreaker has become a beacon of the downtrodden, the one Uden who stood against the people of the Daven Empire and succeeded. To these people, you're somewhat of a hero. Cal's scowl deepened with every word Quentin spoke. His fists started to tremble. Before Quentin could continue, Jord interjected. Perhaps we should relocate this conversation. I fear we have lingered here for too long already. Of course. Quentin extended his arm. Help me, would you? Jord complied, looping Quentin's arm around his shoulder, and helped him limp out of the warehouse. Ah, to be in your arms once again. 'Tis more than this humble rebel deserves, my prince, Quentin said, smiling at Jord. We should hurry. The district is likely to be on high alert by now, Shay said, looking toward Cal. Guessing you didn't clean up after yourself again. Cal shrugged off the comment. Didn't think about it at the time. Mayhap we could use the underground canal system. There should still be a small watercraft sequestered within its shadowy embrace, Quentin chimed. He's right, Jord continued. Something of an escape plan should the worst happen. Oh, it happened, Quentin added, smirking again. Where? Cal asked. Jord gestured toward a series of square metal grates that ran along the floor.
That last one. Pull it up.
Jord leaped in first, turning to receive Quentin as Cal helped lower him in. He bit his tongue as Quentin made a meal of being taken care of. Shay was next, but she stopped and turned to Cal before descending into the escape hole. You've got that look again, she murmured. What's on your mind? Cal watched Quentin as he regaled Jord with exaggerated heroics. You trust him? Shay waited a few seconds before answering. No. Good, Cal replied, his voice barely above a growl. Me either. Got to play D&D. Hello, hello. You are an aspiring author, just stumbled across here. Welcome on in. Glad to have you. I am Sir Arminius. I read indie author books on Tuesdays and Saturdays to help not only spread this wonderful, all of these wonderful indie books, but to, practice my craft as a voice artist because it's a ton of fun. So I'm glad to have you here. What kind of, uh, what kind of books do you write? If you don't mind my asking. I say, sorry I don't respond while I'm doing this. I record each of these and post them to the YouTube channel that you see up here. So, like, we're getting ready to start chapter 14. Or actually, we're probably right about done for the day. I normally do about 2.5 hours before my voice starts to get to the point where it's not good for me to necessarily continue. So, we're probably right about at the time that we're going to call it for the night. But I'd love to know what kind of books that you write. I love to interact with the authors. I do a lot of author interactions on Twitter, X as it is now, and Goodreads and Blue Sky and wherever else I can find authors. Because most of them are indie authors, and because I love so one of the things that I love about indie authors is the fact that people are able to write and publish books now without the gatekeeping of the major publishing houses. But there are some advantages to the major publishing houses if you can get an agent to be able to go in and do stuff with them, such as they will do editing. Um, they help you with marketing. Marketing is something that's hugely missed, unfortunately, for the indie community. And there isn't a good way to substitute for it, which is part of the reason why I do what I do. Why, thank you. Fantasy, sci-fi, soft sci-fi. Working on sci-fi now. Fantastic. Fantasy and sci-fi are by and large my favorite two categories. I'm loving this book that I'm reading right now, Gifted by D.W. Lewis. It's a grimdark fantasy. It's an what did he call it? An epic grimdark fantasy. And it's pretty good. Now myself, I'm writing a psychological thriller right now. So wildly different category, but we work with the twisted thoughts that are in our brains, right? Well, if it's something that you're ever looking for, as long as it's not AI written, hit me up. You can look me up on my website, maloneyvoiceover.com, or you can, connect with me through youtube.com/@SirArminius, through Twitch, through anything like that. If you have stuff that, you'd like me to be able to read for you, I've got, I want to say, after this book, and how far into this book am I now? Not quite halfway. Um, I've got 2 more books to read after this one, and then my schedule opens back up because nobody else is taking spots on the schedule. So, if you have stuff that you'd like me to read, and that goes for anybody out there in the indie community, again, as long as it's not AI written, um, then, then reach out to me. Said my website is the easiest way to get in touch with me. Again, maloneyvoiceover.com. Um, there's contact me buttons on there that'll get in touch with me. But you can also message me through any of the various other platforms that I am on, and I'm happy to connect. Um, take a look at the book or the manuscript or the anything else. So I've been working hard on it. Fantastic thing to be doing. Writing a book is not easy by any stretch of the imagination. So, um, but like I said, call out to anybody. It is a free service that I offer to do these live reads. Um, I record them. They all go up on my YouTube channel, so anybody can listen in later on. In addition, if you happen to be an indie author who's looking for help with marketing, I do a free chapter recording. So I'll do like your first chapter, prologue chapter, things like that. Um, that I do as a free offering of one chapter recorded in audiobook style. So not a live read like this, but actually sitting down, reading through it, doing the editing, putting it into audiobook format for a chapter that you can then use for marketing your book. Again, all ways that I work to give back to the indie author community because again, publishing houses are great. If you can get your book into one of them, they'll take care of all of that kind of stuff for you. But if you can't, having the community is what makes it all happen. So, um, that's part of the reason why I give back, and again, it helps me to practice my craft by reading and voicing and doing the different voices and accents when I get to throw them in there and the practice reading and all of that fun stuff, and, build out my own book of business and do my own types of marketing for my services because there are a lot of voiceover actors out there that are fantastic at what they do. I like to think I'm one of them. But when you have 1,000 fantastic people applying for one job, audiobooks, things like that, you got to find a way to stand out from the crowd. So this is part of what I do to stand out from the crowd. Helps you guys, helps me. But on that note, thank you to all of you. We've made it through. I want to say we started on chapter 8 today. We made it through chapter 13. So 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, plus the interlude. So we made it through 7 little chapter segments today. Very nice. As always, thank you. The greatest gift that you can give to me is a gift of your time. And I appreciate that you guys gave me the gift of yours this evening, whether it was for 5 minutes or for the whole 2.5 hours. I will be back on Thursday. Thursday, of course, is not my reading night. I'll be back with MechWarrior Online, and because every night for me is reading night, Barbette. Yes. So, Thursday, I will be back for MechWarrior Online, and while we play Search Warrior Online, I read Battletech books. They're not indie author books, but they're great lore for the community that I'm streaming to. And then Saturday, of course, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I'll be back starting on chapter 14 as we continue Gyfted. If you just can't wait to move along with this book until I start into the next segment, it is available on Amazon. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. You can get out there and help to support the author by reading on through it and giving him some love that way. Other than that, thank you all so much. I hope you guys have a wonderful evening. It's been my pleasure to bring this to you today, and I will look forward to seeing you guys all again really soon. Have a great night, everybody. And Barb, I gotta go and check my Bezos money. What is what about? Because you said, what is it about? I just want to make sure I'm answering the question right. If you're talking about this book, It's a nice epic fantasy. It's really good. Listen on in. And again, all the chapters previously are up on the YouTube channel. You are welcome to get out there and support the author, and I encourage you to do so. But if not, you can always go and listen in on the YouTube channel, see if it's something that you would be interested in picking up and listening to. Yeah, so Gifted is an epic fantasy book. Um, and so we've got, as a very quick synopsis, uh, basically we've got, these people and you have giftlings who can do minor channelings of the gift, and you have the Gyfted, which are very, very rare, but can majorly channel the gift. Cal, one of our main character through most of this, is a hollowborn. So a hollowborn is somebody who does not have the gift. Uh, the Udos people are being ruled by the Davins and are basically being subjugated by them. And so we see Cal and Shay and Jord and Artemis all as part of the resistance fighting against them. Now, Ovette, who we learned about in the first part of the book, is a Gyfted. She and Cal grew up together in an orphanage. Cal thinks that Ovette is dead. Ovette thinks that Cal is dead. Neither of them know that they both survived. And it's been 8 years since the disaster happened that basically separated the two of them. And so that's what we're journeying through at the moment. I highly recommend, like I said, if it's something that you're interested in, I've really been enjoying this book. It's really good. If it's something that you're interested in, pick it up. If you're not sure if you would be interested in it, that's where my readings are fantastic for some of this. Because you can stop out to the YouTube channel, play them. They're all 100% free. Like, subscribe, comment, do all those fun things on the YouTube channel. YouTube. Um, but you can listen to them for free. And then if you'd like to support the author, go and do so. If not, I appreciate your being here. When we finish this one, we move into the Sentinel project. Oh yeah, my videos are 100% free on the YouTube channel. So you are absolutely welcome to stop out there and listen in that way. If you're not able to purchase a book, I totally get it. Not everybody has disposable income for things like that. Stop out to the YouTube channel, have a listen in. If it's something that you enjoyed, maybe a year from now, you're like, you know what? I'll go spend a couple of dollars and pick it up. I don't think it's terribly expensive on on the on Amazon. Let's see. Let me go look really quick. Um, yeah, the paperback is 18.99. It's free on Kindle Unlimited. It tells me it's $1.98 at the moment, but that's after some credits. So again, we're not talking terribly expensive on most of this stuff, but the author would love you to be able to support him if and when you have the ability to do so. But no rush. For me at least, it's about supporting the indie author community, introducing these books to new audiences, and you are always welcome to come along and listen in to my readings 100% free of charge. I do them out of the goodness of my heart and to practice my audiobook stuff. Yes, Barbette, because my voice is much more soothing, and I'm not NPR. We'd like to bring you to Thoughts for Your Thoughts by Gary Mervils. Today, we are talking about the folk classic Barbette Does Dallas. Ah, yes, Barbette, who once upon a time killed every single inhabitant of the city of Dallas. Dun dun dun. But anyway, Barbette, you know I love you. Yes, yes, yes. All right, guys. I am going to head on out. So, like I said, if you're looking to catch these ones, I have a playlist out there for Gifted that has all of the chapters that I have done in there so far. There's a prologue, and then it goes into chapter 1 through up through chapter 13 will be up there tonight, and up through chapter, I wanna say 7 is there now, and that was through 2 reading sessions, so you got about probably 4 hours worth of listening there, give or take. Maybe a little bit less, I don't know. I don't ever actually go look at that. Pleasure to meet you as well. I hope to see you back again, on Saturday. Come on in and join. And listen, if you're enjoying the videos, like, subscribe, comment, share them with your friends. 100% free. I have probably 8 or 9, 10, 11. I have a lot of different books up on my channel right now, all free to listen to at your leisure. So, have a great night. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to meet you. Don't forget to follow and subscribe. Subscribing on YouTube is free. Thanks, you all. I will see you guys on Thursday. Have a wonderful night.